Welcome to Happy Hour, the Scripts Gone Wild spinoff, where we sit down with folks who make our reads happen, shoot the shit, and see what happens. We are here with actor Edward Hong. Edward, how are you, sir?
Oh, I'm good, man. How are you doing?
Very good. We just restarted this because we did it once before, and Spectrum decided that our talk about the Twilight franchise was not worthy of a.
Oh, we're gonna talk about it again. Screw you,
Oh yeah.
Spectrum.
Oh yeah,
Spectrum
that's right.
can't stop
So
us.
about Twilight. Who would have thought when we watched the Twilight franchise all those years ago that Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson would become two of our most beloved and reliable national treasures?
I just spit water on live cam. Everything is great. Oh, this is going off fantastic. Anyways, Twilight. Where do we begin with this? So recently, my partner and I decided to rewatch Twilight right before the New Year's because Amazon Prime had the extended edition, and we're like, we've never seen the extended edition. How much more extended can you go? How much more torture can we endure? And then we watched it, and first off, it's a disappointment. There's really nothing new or substantial to add to it. It's not like Lord of the Rings where you're like, oh, this feels like a different but necessary kind of thing. That being said, Twilight was still very much enjoyable because of how utterly trashy and dumb it is. And now that I rewatched it again, I will definitely say, and my partner said this too, that Twilight nails the aspect of the stupid, like random the idea of being a teenager. Is just like all the other coming of age teen movies show teenagers either being angsty or just like they're introspective and they're going through stuff in life, and you really root for that teenager. Here, especially Bella, they are dumb, like utterly dumb. And then the one actor who nails what it's like to be a confused parent trying to raise a teenage daughter or son is Billy Burke, the one who plays the dad. He is just like, I don't know what's happening. Like Bella comes in, she storms in, she takes all her stuff, and she's like, I gotta go, I'm leaving. And then the dad's like, what did I do? What did I do? And he is amazing because he feels like the anchor of this franchise. Like everything is just absurd. All the actors, the acting choices are questionable, but Billy Burke is like, he's the man. You're like, you can root for him that he's going to be the most realistic character out of this entire franchise. And then also rewatching it, there are other delightful characters that they had fun, like we were just mentioning earlier, Michael Sheen.
Yes.
He probably got the script and he's like, oh, I'm gonna have fun with this. Yes. And he certainly had fun with that. And so just rewatching it was actually quite delightful. Even there were moments of just sheer like absurdness and sometimes boredom, especially when it got to Breaking Dawn Part 1, where we're just watching them during their honeymoon. And I'm like, okay. And then when actually things started amping up, like action, and we'll always get to the part in Breaking Dawn Part 2, the epic fight scene at the end of the movie, and then it has like one of the most gross use of it's all a dream, it's never real, and it's one of the most frustrating and amazing moments to watch in cinema history because it's so epic. Like you see heads being torn apart and all that, and then it's like, this is what will happen if you fight. And then I'm like, no. Watching again, I still have that reaction. It's as if I'm disappointed again, even though I know it's coming. It still hurts very much watching that. So all in all, an excellent experience. Will we do this again? Yes, we will most certainly watch Twilight again, even though people are actually genuinely ask me, are you masochistic? Do you enjoy pain? And I'm like, it's not pain if you view it as a comedy.
Yeah,
it is an amazing comedy.
It's camp. It's pure camp.
Oh yeah.
I look at it through the lens of a very earnest attempt at camp with some really good actors and directors. Like some amazing directors tackle this franchise. Like Catherine Hardwicke kicked it off. Bill Condon, some amazing filmmakers said, I want to get involved in the Twilight universe.
Oh, speaking of directors, amazing directors who want to get involved in the Twilight universe, the one thing that I remember when I first watched it, when my partner was like, you need to watch Twilight, I'm like, no, and finally she did. And then I realized what really got me in was the soundtrack. It has some of the most eclectic group of artists that a movie franchise could have. Usually let's say Transformers, you okay, there's Linkin Park doing their thing, and they're like, okay, Linkin Park. Twilight had like Paramore, Radiohead, Tom York, Muse, Lupe Fiasco. Like
I
it
know
just,
Iron and Wine does a song on one of those films
yeah.
too. Yeah.
And I remember just hearing that, I'm like, wow, that's something. And then I remember, like, especially with the second movie, The New Moon, that I know it because wait, just rewatched it. When Victoria is being chased by the werewolves in the second movie, the Tom York song "Hearing Damage" comes in, and I'm like, this is terrible because this chase sequence is amazing because of this song. And then I just went, am I liking Twilight? Oh no, this can't happen. But then watching it again, I'm like, you know what? I just have to accept it. I enjoy it. And if people go, are you Team Jacob or Team Edward? Even though I am Edward, I'm like, Team Jacob, man. That
Always.
dude represents
Absolutely Team
love.
Jacob.
Anyone who says Team Edward, I'm like, all right, first off, no. He's absolutely the worst boyfriend anyone could possibly ask for.
Yeah, I want to know how Tom York feels when he's at a concert or on the street and someone comes up to him and they're like, oh, I'm such a massive Radiohead fan. And he's like, oh, how'd you find out about it? It's like, Twilight. I want to know what his reaction, his internal, visceral reaction is to that. I wonder if he thinks, have I done something good with my career? Or does he think, what was I thinking?
It's weird because it's like he's known to be such an anti-corporation individual. Same with the band. And then it's not just that song, but then a Radiohead song was used at the credits for the first movie.
Yeah.
And so it's not just once, it's twice. So he's getting money for basically 2 Twilight films for the rest of his life.
Well, I wonder if he just embraces a heightened campy style because, you know, there was a Radiohead song in Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet. And like, I wonder if they just have a very particular type of film that they're interested in associating with.
Yeah, you know, now you say that, I think if someone
Films
does
for teenage girls.
like, yeah, if someone was like, hey, I heard you because of Twilight, he's probably like, thank you. Otherwise, no one would know because yes, they're definitely mainstream to a degree, but it's not to the point where you can instantly recognize it if you know what you're looking for. So if it's in a Twilight film, you know, millions of tween Twihards have seen it, and they'll probably be like, I want to check out Radiohead. It fits my angst.
Get a whole new demographic of listeners. Like maybe he's a genius. Like he's just gonna keep finding these types of films to insert himself into, so their audience just keeps growing generation to generation.
Oh man.
So I gotta ask you, tell me about the Cinnabon.
All right.
I want to know the whole Cinnabon story. Pretend that this is the oral history of the Cinnabon with you.
So yes, Cinnabon. I have been obsessed with it since I was a kid. I first had my first Cinnabon when I used to live in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I was there for elementary and middle school, and Cinnabon, my reaction to Cinnabon might be similar to a lot of people's reaction to Cinnabon. It's just sheer gluttony and sugar and everything amazing just wrapped into it. And so as a kid, I was obsessed with it. And I think when I went to Korea, we didn't have Cinnabon at that time. So there was that huge absence of like no Cinnabon. And so when I went back to the States and moved around and eventually coming to Los Angeles, Cinnabon would always be a thing I would talk about with my friends. And so it notched up to another degree when a friend of mine asked me, you talk about Cinnabon all the time on social media, blah, blah, blah. Why don't you use that as a marketing device as an actor? And I immediately told her that was the dumbest idea I've ever heard in my entire life. Who would market themselves with a fat pastry product? I thought about it. And it was like 2 or 3 in the morning. And I was just like, oh, so dumb. So dumb. And then I'm like, you know what? So dumb. I'll make some postcard designs on Vistaprint with it. And so I just decided just put some really janky Cinnabon designs and Cinnabon monster, and I found this image and I just like technically stole it, and I just like modified it so it's like, okay, it doesn't look like I stole it. And then I just put it on there. And then I just started like sending it out as postcards to casting directors, to people in the industry, be like, the Cinnabon monster. And then it started working. Like it got to the point where I used to send so many of these postcards back when people are a little more accepting of it. And so it got to the point where I had an actor friend who was at audition, and he was just like, I knew they were talking about you because the casting director was like, hey, who's that guy? He's that Cinnabon, that dude who's weirdly obsessed with Cinnabon. You bring him in for something, just get him in there. And then they're like, oh my god, he's talking about Edward. And I'm like, oh, it's working. So that was the first step. And then it got to the point with all the Cinnabon talk and my social media being at Cinnabon Monster and branding all of that, that the company took notice. Like, they noticed it on social media, and then they reached out to me, and then we had an interaction with them. And then that went on for like a year or two, and then it notched up when another dude I know was going to interview, at that time, the Cinnabon CEO, Kat Cole. She was coming to Los Angeles. They were going to have like a entrepreneur interview. And so he was like, hey, you should come so you can meet her. And I'm like, oh my God, it'll be my dream. Sadly, it couldn't work out. But fast forward to 6 months later, she emailed me because she got my email from my friend and was like, I'm coming back to Los Angeles. We should meet. And I was like, anything I had on that schedule, it's clear. I will make this happen. So I was thinking, she's a busy person. It'll probably be a 10-minute meet, and then she's gonna go off to her meetings. We met at it was like the bar of like this downtown Ace Hotel in Los Angeles.
Yep.
We met for 3 hours. That meeting went on for 3 fucking hours. And people are asking, what did you guys talk about? I'm like, we talked about life, man. We talked about how she, well, you know, when her dad left her and she had to pretty much take care of her sisters and her mom. So she worked at Hooters when she was like 15, 16. And then not to like literally at 16, she apparently was so good at what she did. They flew her to Australia to launch the Hooters Australia brand at 16. And I'm just listening to it. I'm like, what the fuck was I doing at 16? Masturbating? That was all I was doing. And so I was just blown by what this woman accomplished. And just her trajectory from there to like being the COO of Cinnabon and then becoming the CEO of Cinnabon. And then here we were talking, and then we were talking, and she was asking, what are your dreams, all this. And I'm just like, hey man, you know, I know you guys don't really do commercials, but if you ever did, I want to be your fucking spokesperson. And she's like, I love it. We don't do Cinnabons because we don't have any advertising money for that, but I love your passion. And so I didn't care if I got anything concrete out of it. I was just glad to have met her.
Yeah.
I do know that if there was something concrete that came after, was that later on, there was a movie called Please Stand By, which was starring Dakota Fanning. And my friends, all who had breakdowns, all sent me this notice, and they're like, dude, they are literally looking for a part. He is called the Cinnabon guy. Like, he's called the Cinnabon guy. You need to audition for this. And so I was like going out of my mind, told my manager and agent, and they're like, oh my God, we know about this too. And so I went out of my way to send postcards to the casting director, the director, and all of that. And then finally I got the audition, and then so I was sent in. It was like December 15th, and I knew that offices were already packing up for the holidays. And so when the casting director saw me, he was just like, ugh. There was no other person. I was the only person in the room. He was like, I already saw all the parts for this, but your manager was like, yeah, you need to be seen. And some other people were like, yeah, Edward needs to be seen. And he's like, okay, I'm just gonna be real with you. We already cast this part, but here, just audition. And I'm like, oh, whatever, just go for it. I auditioned for the part, and then like a week later, my agent told me, you got the part, which I was like, how is that possible? 2 months later, it was like around January 2016 when we filmed the role. It was basically in a scene with, it was Dakota, this great comedian actor named Matt Cardapol, who many might have seen in a bunch of comedy shows. And then there was, I forgot the guy's name, Tony something. He plays Flash in the new Spider-Man movies. He's the bully character in that. He was the main character in Grand Budapest Hotel. There we go. So he was in the scene with me. Great guy. He's really awesome. And so we're all doing this thing. And then there's a break moment. The producer is like, hey, I want to meet you because I want to talk about all the Cinnabon postcards you sent to us. And I'm like, oh shit, you got that. And then they told me the full story of how I got to be in shooting at a Cinnabon store in Torrance at the Westfield Mall. And so they were like, we got the postcards, the director got the postcard, and we're like, all right, this is oddly, very bizarrely specific. Like, what's going on here? So then they contacted the company, the Cinnabon company, and we're like, do you know this Edward Hong guy? Like, what's up? What's going on? Is he crazy? What's going on with him? And so they told the producers, they're like, oh, we love Edward. He's great. If he has an audition for the Cinnabon guy, he needs to audition. And if he's auditioned and he was decent, just give him a part. And so they're like, okay. And then they contacted the casting director, like, I think, did we already cast a role? And he's like, yeah, we already did it. They're like, all right, we're just gonna give it to Edward. We're just gonna give it to him. And so when I learned that, two reactions happened. I was very, very honored and also horrified, because I've been in a position of being recast because of either corporate interference, or the director or the producers like, you know what? No. Let's go with this other guy. Even though we already cast this part, I've been in that position and it sucks. And so I felt that I felt bad for the other actor. I was like, shit, man, I took that guy's part. But at the same time, I'm like, shit, man, this is what A-listers go through. Like, they're not just appeasing to casting directors, they're appeasing to corporations, they're appeasing to the higher ups beyond just the entertainment company to be in movies, and that is the game. And so I just tasted like a fraction of what this. And if people say, did I enjoy it, I'm not sure. It's not about talent then. It's about just who you know, which is the whole stereotype of Hollywood, which is true. There is that factor. But they said, hey, you know, we did cast you in this, but you were good for the part. And so it's not like we just cast some like no talented actor. I'm like, I guess I feel slightly better with that. By the end of the shoot, the Cinnabon representative that was there sent me home with 8 packs of Cinnabon. Like, they're like, here, take all these Cinnabons with you. And I'm like, Jesus, this is a lot of Cinnabons. So then I just started distributing that to like various places. I remember I went off to various stops. I went off to the casting office, then to like the production company. Then I was like, do Children's Hospital, will they like this? And then I was just dropped by. They're like, oh shit, give it to us. Give us the Cinnabons. So they took it too. And so that has been my overall experience with Cinnabon since 2016. If people are you still crazy marketing with Cinnabon? I'm like, no, it's pretty chill. It's there. Like, also, I'm at a point in my age where I used to be able to eat like 3 Cinnabons in one sitting and still, you know, kick it. I eat maybe half a Cinnabon and I'm like, I need to take a nap for like 10 hours now.
Yeah.
That's where I am. I still enjoy it, but it's something that I can't enjoy as much as I used to back in my good old
back in your
youth.
So I guess one might say, my voice is doing a weird thing. Okay, it stopped. I guess one could say to the person that you replaced in that film that you were indeed a Cinnabon monster.
Yes, absolutely.
Have you had the Bun Bun?
What is the Bun Bun?
The Bun Bun is a homemade concoction from an LA restaurant called Go Get 'em Tiger. And there are a couple of locations in LA. It is basically like a Cinnabon, but it doesn't have the icing on top. It's like this crispy fried dough concoction with cinnamon cream stuffed inside of it. And it is one of the most delicious things I've ever had in my life. I get one at least a couple times a week for breakfast. It is incredible. Where do you live at in LA?
I live in Pasadena, so I see it. They're in the Highland Park area.
Yeah. I think they have one over there. Get a Bun Bun.
I'm gonna get a Bun Bun, man.
Incredible. It'll be your new favorite thing, I promise you.
Oh, so good. I see it. Oh my God. All right.
Big ups to Go Get 'em Tiger if anybody's watching. Boy. Awesome place for breakfast. I'm curious, what has quarantine been like for you in terms of like as an actor in quarantine in LA, also known as Ground Zero of Thunderdome?
Yeah. Oh, my God. I know the quarantine has been many things for many people. In terms of my experience, it was very rough. There's no sugarcoating it. I think there's several highlighted points of if people ask like what was it like if I could summarize it. It started off obviously disbelief, a lot of things, and rage at like the our current administration, or now at this point hopefully the outgoing administration and their gross mishandling of it. So my rage at that, my rage at my former acting school, which I was part of for a decade, because the owner is a complete MAGA head, doesn't believe the COVID is a threat, and demanded that classes were still supposed to be held in person. And so I think what also exacerbated by that was that I had a friend in part of that class, a dear friend who I've known for 78 years, passed away from COVID back in late March. And so when the owner of the school was, when he was talking about it, was like when he had these Zoom seminars, and he was like, "Oh, we're very sorry for his friend. He died of like other circumstances, but it wasn't COVID." And I'm just like, you can't deny it. It's COVID. Like it was in his autopsy. Like his closest friends have told me when, because I remember when I got the news, I had 3 people call me at like around midnight, and you know that's bad sign when you have random people calling you at that
It's
late
the
in the
worst.
hour. Like
It's the worst.
this is the worst. And so I got that phone call, multiple phone calls, and and then just hearing that, and then hearing this owner talk about the non-existence of it, and I was just infuriated. And I was infuriated by all my friends who and acquaintances who just didn't take it seriously. And it coming from where I used to live in Korea, where especially the East Asian countries, they are no strangers to the epidemics. So obviously without any surprise, they handled it right away. Like Taiwan, Vietnam, Korea, like they were like, oh shit, we got to take this seriously. And so seeing Americans handle this was bewildering. It was just like, you see the facts. You are seeing, we are not in a stone age where we don't have technology to see how the other parts of the world is handling it. We're watching it. And yet this, I never imagined, nor did many of us imagine, that we would be at a war with science, that science became like a thing to not trust anymore. And so that was the beginning part of it. It was rage, it was this, and at one point I think I'm no, my partner definitely affirmed I had like a mental breakdown where I felt like I was genuinely suicidal. I was just like, there's no point in anything, like, you know, we're just living in a shit show right now, everything's a fucking joke, and there's no such thing as consequences, because that 45 man can do whatever fuck he wants, and there's no consequence. There's no meaning to anything. And so thankfully my partner got me out of that. And so after that, it mellowed out to just trying to be productive whatever I can. For actors, especially theater actors, we were doing whatever we could to stay busy, which is a lot of Zoom readings, Zoom performances, and all that. And so it was rough. And then I got numb, and then I was optimistic, and then I just got super jaded, and then I was like totally chill with the world, and then I got mad again. And then that was all before the George Floyd incident.
Yeah.
And then when the George Floyd incident came in, everything went back up again, because I've always been such a loud advocate in terms of fighting against systemic racism, whether it's just spouting off on social media or actually trying to do something about it. And I just remember during that process losing so many of not only my white acquaintances and friends, but also non-Black acquaintances, right, who just didn't get it, especially our Asian American community, where we have a history of anti-Black racism that is not really talked about in our community. And so it was most apparent when anytime people talked about riots, like, oh, rioting is so bad, like, oh, I would never riot, you know, you guys, those people need to express themselves better. And I'm like, look, we have never been in the position where our own people have been constantly murdered and like shown on the news and vilified for no fucking reason at all. We do not know what that experience is like. So until then, I can't say anyone, oh, shame on you for rioting and burning shit down. Now I can say, yes, it sucks for small business owners who didn't deserve it. Like, it's not to say that they deserved it or anything like that, but it's just like when the system beats upon you to the point that anything you do, even if it's just bending the knee And even then, that was considered inappropriate. If bending the knee is inappropriate or singing about it is inappropriate, yeah, I'm just gonna burn shit down without any consequence. And that is something that it's hard to really get through. And I can't really tell that because I'm not a black person.
Yeah.
So for a non-black person to tell another non-black person it's totally justified, doesn't really have weight to it unless you are of that's affected.
And it's like, what does anyone expect to happen when you're trying to speak up against something like systemic racism? What's the least you can do? The least you can do is probably take a knee. Like, that's not like, and when that's not even acceptable, when the least you can do is not even okay by like, what do you expect people to do? Like, I mean, of course that's going to build in crescendo to a breaking point. And, I'm very cynical when it comes to America and what we do and choose not to do. I always feel like, I just don't feel like there's ever progress made enough in a direction. So it's always like it's enough progress, and then the news cycle changes and it just goes away. Like
it always resets. Yeah.
School shootings is another example where it's like something will happen like Newtown, which was like when Newtown happened, everybody was like, well, how can this many kids be dead and something not be done about it? And the whole time I'm thinking, nothing will be done about it. In 2 years, we won't even be thinking about it anymore. It'll be something else. And like, this though has been inspiring in the sense of like, it has beaten back my sort of cynicism a little bit, but to see it stay so strong in the mainstream and keep pushing forward, where I'm like, okay, maybe something actually will happen. Maybe we finally reach that tipping point where we're actually to the point where like, this isn't acceptable anymore. I hope,
I hope as well. I think it's the needle has moved definitely higher than it's ever had before, especially if the Black Lives Matter movement was not only just national, but it was global. Like, especially in my friends in Korea showed me videos and pictures of Black Lives Matter protests happening in Korea. And if that can happen there, then you know that this has been a difference. There's a different thing happening with that. And so there is hope in the same time, but at the same time, we can never be complacent because, like you said before, there's always that tendency to reset itself, to go back to the status quo. Absolutely. Because once people forget about all the trauma and all the pain, they just go back to their own lives, which I think actually says a lot about the human condition. It's like, it's not just the racism or systemic racism, it's just trauma. It's just like, once we pass that, we kind of like pretend it didn't quite happen, and we kind of like regress. We kind of forget about the lessons that we learned, which is a lot of us. I know others are better about like remembering pain and remembering, the things that got them there and to not do that. But there are many of us, I think we are guilty of just forgetting. Amnesia is definitely a big part of it, especially, and I guess it's not so much to blame ourselves, but also just our society where there's so much being thrown at us, especially now. The past year alone was an information overload. It was too much. And I think I can't quite blame others, even though I want to be on the high horse and be like, how can you forget? But at the same time, it's like, I don't know what they're going through. They got their lives as well, but we're being thrown so much that it's kind of hard to track which thing do you care about and stick with it. And that has been definitely a challenge for, I would say, many of us.
Yeah, I feel like America is very 2 steps forward, 3 steps back in a lot of ways. And, looking at it from the extent of like, I grew up predominantly in the Clinton presidency, which at the time seemed like an amazing thing. And in a lot of ways, it was horrible, especially for Black people. But we started moving a little bit forward in certain areas, and then George W. Bush gets elected, and it's 3 steps back. Yeah. Then we get Obama in office, and it's forward march. Then we get Trump, and it's 3 steps back. And it's like, I keep waiting for that inversion so we can actually start making up more ground, because it feels like as a progressive or as a liberal, as whatever anybody identifies themselves as, you reach this point where you're getting so optimistic and so hopeful because all these things keep happening, and then the rug just gets pulled out from under you. And it has nothing to do with the overall population of the country. The overall population of the country is more center left than it is anything else. It's just that the people in power are center right, or even further that way.
Yes.
And that sort of divide is not something I think we've been able to grapple with. And it all comes to voting. And we were talking about earlier off air about like the Georgia runoffs, which are coming up, how important those are, how important voting is predominantly, in Georgia right now, because it literally, it basically defines the next 4 years of the country to some degree, and how we're going to live. And it's terrifying to some degree to think that so much of our lives are controlled by one state, one group of people in one state, two people. Like it's crazy to think.
I know.
It's just, I wonder more than anything else. Let's say that they win. Let's say that we get the control of the Senate and we have the power to make these changes. What happens in 4 or 8 years? Are we just going to revert back to the same old crap?
It's definitely hard because it's like I at the same time I have to be aware that the victories, whatever victory we face, the joy, let's say when Biden became president, that the opposite side, the ones who voted for Trump, they felt sheer loss. They felt absolute misery. And I know we did, especially progressives and liberals, felt misery when 45 won in 2016. And so I think the thing, and especially now, it's like now what 45 is doing is basically weaponizing the hatred and the anger of especially by basically refusing that he lost. And so this sets a dangerous precedence in the future where it's like, at that point, it just becomes a grudge that will never heal. It'll just be, it's like we've always, as a country, and obviously this is like a seminar in itself, but it's like the divide has been growing in terms of like, here's these group of people, and here's that group of people. But now, never before has the divide been so clear. Like this is like a unmistakable divide that when people say, why don't we all just get together? We can all just unite in some things. And I'm like, I hate to be a Debbie Downer. We are past that point. Yeah. It is, we can't heal from that. And so I think the danger of Democrats is that they always want to be optimistic, especially the centrist Democrats. They always want to be like, but we can do it. We can be friends. And I think that either that, I know guilty enough, for me, my white heterosexual friends always want to be optimistic about everything will be fine. We can be friends with it'll all blow away in the past few years. I'm like, you can't just blow away someone who downright degrades others, who doesn't believe that gay people have rights, who doesn't believe they can be married, who doesn't believe immigrants have rights, that they should just be in cages. Like, I can't look at that person again. Like, I can't be friends with that person.
Yeah.
And it's not just, and people always say it's just politics. Like, don't ruin your friendship with politics. I'm like, we have to stop saying it's politics and actually say it's human rights.
Yeah.
To say that these people don't have rights because that's what you believe in. You believe in this dude who advocates of that. We can't, this is where we split paths. And that's definitely happened a lot during the quarantine. Like, that was definitely, like, if I look back on it, it was hard, but I think I was glad to stand up for it, to stand up for what I believed in, and not, because I know many times in the past I've always been like, oh, I don't want to start a fight. I don't want to do that. I still want to be friends with you. But then I'm like, you know what? It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. I think it's been great to see people like me who stood up for what they believed in. And even though they suffered great loss, they've severed connections even from their family. I've had one actor I know who like severed her ties with her dad because her dad was a complete nut job. And I think she like tolerated for pretty much 40 years of her life. And then finally was just like, you're not part of my life anymore.
Yeah.
And it's hard. But I think last year has been a great lesson in terms of just being able to make those hard choices and be better. So,
well, yeah, I think being better is a good thing to do in general. Wow, we flew through that half hour with a. Thanks for chatting with us, sir. That was delightful. I'm going to do a couple of quick plugs. Our next read, when this drops, will be The Faculty on January 6th. And then you're going to be joining us for our reading of Ma on January 20th, which is going to be batshit insane. You can check us out at scriptsgonewild.com, patreon.com/scriptsgonewild. Buy some merch on the website. Go to the merch tab and you can get shirts, mugs, masks, all that fun stuff. And where can we find you on the socials?
All my socials, easily enough, can be found at Cinnabon Monster. That it's on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter at Cinnabon Monster. It's very easy to find me. It's basically you find a picture of me with basically these Cinnabons around me, and there you have it.
And also, if you're ever auditioning for a role with Cinnabon in the title, just know that he will cut your throat and take that role from you. That's a given. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.